In 2009, I'm 12 years old. For Thanksgiving, my extended family is celebrating at a rented beach house in Myrtle Beach. I'm an awkward and shy teenager, living my life before I understood my anxiety and how it affected my social skills. Despite spending an entire weekend next to a beautiful beach that we basically had to ourselves, I'm mostly looking forward to playing the newly released Modern Warfare 2 and Left 4 Dead 2. On the first day we arrive, my family decides to go for a walk on the beach, and I tag along, feeling like I'm forced into the situation. We pass by other families walking, seagulls catching what food they can, and a man fishing in the ocean, which seemed weird to me at the time. After walking in one direction for what felt like 20 minutes, and feeling the sand and water on my feet, I decided to head back. My mom asks if I know where the house is, and I say I do, and I then begin to walk. I walk for what feels like 30 minutes in the opposite direction. I don't see the house. I turn around and walk back. I walk for what feels like an hour, and I pass the man fishing in the ocean. I can't find the house. The vague image in my head of the house is not appearing in front of me. I pace back and forth for what feels like an eternity, always passing the same landmarks, the other families, the seagulls, the fishermen. And each time, I can't find the house. My anxiety is crippling. The open air is closing in. My thoughts play out every worst-case scenario, and I see no end in sight. I think to ask passers-by for their phone, but I'm too young, too anxious, too scared to ask. I will be lost on this beach forever. As I begin to come to terms with my fate, I hear someone call my name. It's my aunt, running out of the house I've been searching for the past eternity. Turns out, I was right in front of it. In 2020, I'm 23 years old. The Criterion Collection has released the complete films of Agnes Varda, a massive collection of every feature and short directed by the influential French New Wave director. The artist's 60-year career collected onto 15 discs and presented in the highest quality possible. The set also includes numerous interviews, introductions, analysis, history lessons, many of which feature Varda herself. A fitting tribute for a woman who recently passed but has not so easily been forgotten. I was excited to own this collection, not because I'm necessarily a fan of Varda, I've only seen Cleo from 5 to 7, but because I wanted to know more about her and her style. What I had seen impressed me, and she seemed like an incredible artist worth studying and learning from. My favorite discovery so far has been 2 short films Varda made early in her career. In fact, they're the second and third films she ever made, Saison, Ochato, and Ducot de la Cote. These 2 films were commissioned by the French government, who wanted Varda to make travelogue films that would convince people to visit popular vacation spots in France. But Varda didn't just make a travelogue. Yes, she does show off the beauty of the castles in the Loire Valley and the tourist beaches and towns of South France, thanks in no small part to the color film, which adds a real vibrancy to these locations. No, Varda also makes these films her own. She finds what interests her in these locations, and create short films that have narratives, explore themes, and play with the medium. You can feel her creativity in the first scene of Saison, Ochato. In this documentary about extravagant castles built by the royal upper class of France over centuries, the film opens with a stage scene of garden workers raking leaves. The fall leaves pop and entice, the kinetic editing is stylized, and the jazz soundtrack announces itself in a booming fashion. The workers' hands are choreographed to the instruments, though more truthfully it's the other way around. Their hands evoke the power of trumpets, the old men warming their hands as the instruments themselves prepare for the score. The broom invades the scene, carrying the rhythm of a snare drum as the autumn leaves sway back and forth. As the workers walk out of the frame, the film's title appears on screen, with the narrator slowly and deliberately reading the title aloud. This thesis statement of an intro declares the point of this film. This is not a traditional government-funded educational tourist attraction. This is art informed by what was found in the chateau. This is a jazz soundtrack adding layers to the visuals. This is playful, joyful, and alive. This is history brought to modernity. This is cinema. Saison, Ochato covers a lot of ground in 21 minutes. It's a visual history lesson, with a narrator giving an abridged history of the castles built in the Loire Valley. The narration covers centuries of war, artistic movements, and revolutions in mere seconds. Artists create eternal masterpieces. Decades-old empires fall. History itself moves in the span of 20 dazzling minutes. It's also an architecture appreciation short, showcasing the beautiful, style-meshing, and meticulously maintained chateau of the valley. It's also a commentary on class and its relation to history, where the long-dead royalty, who spent their lives doing as they pleased, creating impossible structures just for the hell of it, continue to oppress their will on the lower class, particularly the generations of servants and groundskeepers that still maintain these buildings' beauty to this day. Ultimately, Saison, Ochato is a human film. It explores the impact structures and history have on people for generations, how these inanimate buildings can inspire art, passion, and even the making of this film. It's a celebration of those groundskeepers working tirelessly for generations, the villagers living their day-to-day lives in the shadows of history. Saison, Ochato was followed soon after by Ducot de la Cote, where Varda made another uniquely gorgeous film showing off the coasts and towns in the south of France. Places like Cannes and Nice are presented in gorgeous saturated colors filled to the brim with foreign tourists. The film's subject is in fact these tourists and their effect on the popular towns and their sightseeing spots. The short starts by straight up telling us that this movie is not about the natives of this town, as it doesn't want to destroy the illusion of these vacation spots. From there, the film flows like an essay, discussing one topic before quickly setting up and exploring a new topic, all in a journey to answer one question. Why do people come here? Ducot begins by exploring the history of this coast as a tourist spot, then glides into discussing the tourist's inclination to get a tan, quickly spotting the popular restaurants and our fascination with celebrities. By the end, the film decides that people are searching for Eden on the coast. While Eden does exist on the south of France, it's found off the coast, on an island, kept hidden by the rich who close the garden from the general public. It's a fun and clever film with some biting criticisms of the tourists, talking about them with poetic fascination. It treats them as if they're exotic animals in a nature documentary at times. The best moment is when the film compares tourists spending their time on the beach in a tent to those who bought prime real estate for their graves, desiring the status of a beachfront view but never attempting to actually enjoy it. It's funny and educational, full of astounding editing, music, and shot composition. Yet it also captures the melancholy of going on vacation, of spending what feels like an ultimately short time exploring, relaxing, and having fun, only to inevitably pack up and go home. These two shorts simply blew me away. I was engaged, informed, and astounded at Varda's natural creativity. They feel effortless, flowing naturally with expert editing and intelligent timing. By watching the included interviews and introductions, I got the sense that Varda was a person who followed her own interests, letting concepts and ideas create her work. She never rested on her laurels and seems to strive to create something new, interesting, and unique every single time she picks up a camera. These films accomplish two goals. One, they made me want to visit these places someday, and two, they inspired me creatively. And after 2020, I really needed both of those. When Ducot de la Cote ends with a melancholic song reminiscing about the end of summer and the changing seasons, I felt sad. This past year, I never got to feel that unique sensation of a vacation ending, of packing up the car and preparing for the ride home. Despite having never been to the south of France, this final moment made me feel nostalgic. Not for the beautiful coastline, but for an outdoor getaway in general. Nostalgic for hanging out with friends, feeling the warmth and breeze of summer, of not worrying about catching a life-threatening disease and spreading it to others, or not having anxiety about my country seemingly on the verge of falling apart any day. And I can only complain so much. Despite it all, I still have a roof over my head, I still have my job, I am extremely fortunate and lucky enough to be able to watch these films and worry about these introspective feelings. Millions more have lost their lives or fear for their current lives. They can't find food, barely living paycheck to paycheck. And I feel hopeless and small, since there are very few avenues for me to help these people. My daily crippling anxiety made sure 2020 was at once creatively fulfilling and defeating. What I did create I was extremely proud of, but I didn't create as much as I would have liked, and I initially spent a lot of my time inside observing the tragedies occurring right outside my door. After a while, I stopped paying as much attention outside, or at least I tried. Instead, I spent most of my time ignoring that horror and anxiety in the world and instead escaped into games and movies. I found comfort in rewatching old favorites and trying to turn my brain off. I found comfort in nostalgia. Nostalgic media also brings nostalgic memories of fun times in school, scary times that shaped my life, and, of course, of past vacations. I couldn't help but keep coming back to that Thanksgiving where I got lost on the beach. My daily life was filled with that never-ending anxiety, where I'm too paralyzed with fear and stress to ask for help. My body refuses to act. I can only let my mind run wild. My light-headed, overactive thoughts forcing me to be physically inactive. The difference this time is that there's no one calling my name, no house I've easily missed while I'm lost in my head. This time it really does feel like eternity. My situation is not unique. And in fact, I'm extremely privileged to be able to mostly stay home this year and keep myself and loved ones safe. But I've been thinking about 2020 and that beach a lot as we begin 2021. I watched Saison, Ochato, and Ducot de la Cote during the last week of 2020. Seeing these beautiful vistas, hearing the fascinating history of these places, and experiencing the unbridled creativity on display, it was impossible to not think about how the past 12 months were devoid of all of that. These short films, made over 60 years ago, are somehow still fresh and inspiring. They made me rethink the past year and my own creative output. I find it hard not to shame myself for not working tirelessly to create analysis or art that I would be proud of. I'm sure a lot of us have felt that same way. In fact, I'm pretty sure Varda herself went through those same anxieties and struggles. In doing research for this video, I found a TED Talk from Varda filmed 1 year before her death. In this talk, she discusses inspiration and what has kept her driven to make films for most of her life.
Inspiration is my subject. Not the physical action of breathing, and not the charming romantic muses coming to whisper in the ear of a poet. No, speaking about a strong word, inspiration, which goes with creation and sharing. Those are the words who have been in the middle of my working life.
Inspiration can come from anywhere, whatever may interest you and get your brain racing. You need to jump at that chance to create, to express and capture the emotions and ideas that inspired you. And your goal should be to share these feelings and interests with others. In this presentation, there is no mention of anxiety, creative blocks, any negativity to speak of. It feels effortless. That's not to say Varda had no difficulties in making her art. She self-financed many of her films. In fact, she went into the medium itself with little to no experience in filmmaking. She has a long history of diving headfirst into many mediums without any prior knowledge or expertise. And yet, she consistently comes out the other side with interesting and impactful art. And I think that comes from her outlook on creating art. Inspiration, creation, sharing. All inspired art is personal expression. All growth comes from a creative attempt to express oneself. And all success comes from the community you connect with by sharing your personal and unique art. This video is meant to be an exercise in that process. To try and express why these two short films from decades ago, exploring places I probably will never see, still inspire me artistically. While this past year has been difficult on my mental health and killed most of my motivation, these films brought back that spark. Something that on the surface I could never relate to has become a core inspiration for me to create, evoking emotions that I feel a burning need to share. My biggest problem growing up was not understanding how to express myself. On that beach in 2009, I had no idea how to properly express my fear, anxiety, and disorientation. Seeing my aunt reminded me of the avenues that I had, that comfort of safety where I was free to express myself, to let out all of my emotions, to remind me that all of my anxiety was in my head. Varda's films accomplish that same feeling of comfort and safety. They've given me a way to express myself, starting a conversation and inviting me to respond, inviting me with no judgment or shame, just open ears and empathy. And in that way, I would say these films are successful. I can only dream of making something as impactful and eternal as the entirety of Varda's entire filmography. And I think a lot of us feel that same way. But we won't get there if we don't try.